Call to order the City Council meeting for January 17th, 2022. Roll call, please.
Beaufore. Here. Birgen.
Here I am.
Drenkow.
Here.
Meyers.
Here.
Kangas.
Present.
Rathe.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
And our guest councilperson, David Cowling, let me know that he was not feeling well today, so he will not be joining us tonight. And the mayor is also out of town, so I am taking over as presiding officer for tonight as well. Okay, I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item would be approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion on that?
I will move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Drenkow, seconded by Birgen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We have approved the agenda. And next item is the approval of the minutes from January 3rd, 2022. We have a motion on that.
I will move approval of the agenda for January 3rd, 2022.
The minutes?
The minutes, thank you. Yes.
Second.
Moved by Birgen, seconded by Rathe. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And we have approved the minutes. Next item on the agenda is presentation of certificate of appreciation to those boards and commission members who are concluding their terms. And we have one here tonight, so I will name the other four that will be getting theirs mailed. That'd be Crystal Harms from the Economic Development Commission, Galen Brunson from the Electric Utility Board of Trustees, Clark Willarm of the Municipal Housing Commission, and James Carver from the Leisure Services Commission. And then I get the pleasure of thanking Gary Grace from the Economic Development Commission. Gary, come up.
Yeah, how does it sound?
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Do you have any words you wish to say?
Not really. I guess, yeah, it's kind of weird being back in here after. Between the 10 years I was on council and where I served as liaison to the Economic Development Commission, I guess it was about very grateful to the quality of the staff and elected servants like you, and appreciate it, and hopefully continue doing the good things you are. Appreciate that recognition. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next item on the agenda is item G. It's a public hearing. This is the date, time, and place for the continuation of the December 6, 2021 public hearing on a resolution to accept an offer to purchase 3 parcels of land owned by the City of Waverly. The mayor and city council will entertain any comments. After all comments, the hearing will be declared closed and the following action will be considered. That is the sale of the Champions Ridge land. And do we have anybody who wishes to speak? Do we have any written or?
There are none.
Seeing nobody rising, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 22-04, authorizing the sale of 3 parcels of land described as Parcel M. That's parcel number 09043000015, and Parcel N, parcel number 09043000013, and Parcel O, parcel 09043000016, owned by the City of Waverly for the sum of $1,855,877 to the buyer, Waverly Holdings LLC of Waverly, Iowa.
Second.
Motion by Schneider, second by Meyers. Any council discussion on this?
Do we know any further development that's going on there?
Okay, having no discussion, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Beaufore,
Yes.
Birgen,
Yes.
Drenkow,
Yes.
Kangas,
Yes.
Meyers,
Yes.
Rathe,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
By a vote of 7 yes, 0 no's, the motion passes. Item H is public comments. Any public comments for items not on the agenda? Not seeing anybody rushing the podium, so we will go ahead and move to item I, which is the consent calendar. The following items will be acted upon by voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately. Item 1 is a pay request from WHKS and Company for the 3rd Street Southeast Bridge removal for the amount of $3,973.28. Item 2 is pay request from Building and Grounds LLC for the South Riverside Plaza 2021 for the amount of $31,669. Item 3 is pay request from Cardinal Construction Inc. for the South Riverside Park and Shelter 2020 for the amount of $4,774.50. Item 4 is pay request from Nagel Signs Incorporated for the park signs for the amount of $27,906.20. Item 5 is a pay request from Gritter Construction Incorporated for the WPC Facility Improvements 2020 for the amount of $932,314.80. Item 6 is pay request from Pit Pros Inc. for the Fall 2021 sludge hauling and disposal for the amount of $39,000. Item 7 is a Class C liquor license for Waverly Area Veterans Post. And item 8 is a Class C liquor license for Joe's Nighthawk. A motion on that.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar as read by the Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
Moved by Rathe, seconded by Drenkow. All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? And we approve the consent calendar. We move on to regular business. Item number 1, highlight of every January, is our review of the fiscal year 2021 City of Waverly audit by Chad Rainier from Williams & Company, PC.
We're going this route for Mayor Pro Tem, in case people are wondering. That's a 7-hour round-trip drive for Chad. And for the time it takes to get through this, I didn't really feel it was fair to have them make that trip at this point in time. We're the farthest entity in their realm of auditing. There used to be a few others in this area, but we are it, so it didn't seem like a very good use of their time or our cost to have them make that trip. So he will be presenting tonight via Zoom instead.
Okay. Usually it's been like one of the worst nights of the winter that they
Tends to bring an ice storm when they come, so thought we'd gamble and not have it.
Okay, Chad, whenever you're ready.
Can everybody hear me fine?
Yes.
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 Yep, you're good.
All right. So, I could hear James in the background, couldn't hear him the greatest, but I'm Chad with Williams & Company. We audited the fiscal year 21 financial statement, and I figured I'd just kind of go through it. I believe that you all should have a hard copy in front of you to follow along. We'll just kind of walk through the report, starting on page 1, that this is the letter of transmittal that basically is where it can kind of go through and talk about what's happening throughout the city of Waverly, businesses coming to town, or just basically anything that's happening. Page 6 is the certificate of achievement in excellent financial reporting. So we submitted the FY20 audit report to GFOA for the certificate, and the city was awarded this certificate. We've been receiving this certificate for many years. We And so those are the standards that we have to audit the city by, and that's how it was done. It's a little bit more to it than a for-profit business, that there's more that we have to do than just a normal for-profit. Page 9 is the opinion, and it states, in our opinion, based on our audit and the reports of other auditors, that's the auditors of Waverly Utilities and the hospital, that we got their audit report and we make reference to their report. The financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects, and so that's the clean opinion that you always want and that the city did receive. Page 11 is the start of the management discussion analysis. This is a good section showing comparative information from FY20 to FY21. If you don't have time to read the whole report, that's a good section to kind of flip through and then be able to kind of get some of the highlights of what happened. Page 21 is the government-wide balance sheet, that this is the 10,000-foot level, that you can't really make any management decisions by looking at this report, that basically it just shows what the city owns and what the city owes. Page 22 and 23 is the government-wide income statement, kind of the same thing there. Starting on page 24 is the fund financial statements. Every fund is shown somewhere in this report. The larger funds are up front, smaller funds in the back. One thing that we always like to point out is if you take the general fund unassigned fund balance of that 3.4 million, divide that into number of days that you guys have on hand compared to the current year expenditures, you have 212 days. So that means that the general fund could operate 212 days and not receive any additional resources, and you have enough funds to function for 212 days, and that's up from 161 days from last year. So the general fund is sitting very well. Page 27 is the governmental fund income statement. Page 30 is the utility balance sheet. And page 31 and 32 is the income statement, and after that you got the cash flows. Page 37, 38, just want to point out there was a small change in the standards this year, that you guys reporting agency funds, which was the Warburg fund or whatever for the rec center. And now it's called custodial funds, and those financial statements are in the front of the report. Before they were in the back, and they were shown a little bit different. Not much change there, but there was a little bit of a change in the standard. Starting on page 39 is the notes to the financial statements, so we're probably just kind of skip over all that. There's a lot of good detail in those notes that if you wanted to go back and take a look at, there's they support the financial statements. Page 77 and 78 is the budget to actual schedule. You'll see that the city did not go over budget in any area, so that's good to see. Then starting on page 89 is the smaller funds financial statements. So right here is just the balance sheet for all the other smaller funds. Then you got the income statement that follows it. Start on page 107 is the start of the stat section. So there's roughly about 20 different stat tables that goes into this report, and that's required to submit it to GFOA for the certificate in achievement in financial reporting. 138 is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So you'll see that you had $960,000 in federal awards that were spent. Once you get above $750,000, then you have to do, you're subject to the Single Audit Act. So we had to test one grant, and that ended up being the airport grant, where you had $632,000. I suspect that we'll be having to test more federal programs come in the future because of all the COVID money and everything that has come out. With the ARPA funds, I believe that the city has received half of that. They'll be receiving the other half come next summer sometime. Page 139 then just states that we're not required to, and we did not test internal controls, but we're required to gain an understanding of the internal controls, and that's basically all that states there. And then page 141, like I mentioned, we had a look at the airport grant. This report is just saying that we tested it for compliance and we didn't find any issues with that grant. On page 143 is the schedule of findings that, just like every year, we have the journal entry finding that basically once you have one journal entry, we have to have that finding. 95% of our clients have that finding. It's nothing to be too concerned about. Like I said, that basically it's an unattainable standard that you would have to be perfect to not have that finding, and nobody's perfect. Otherwise, I think that's probably about it. Does anybody have any questions?
So I'm seeing a common phrase in here, a deficiency in internal control over compliance exists. So this is kind of in our, in your reports where you're talking about observing our auditing. What does that mean, and kind of, is that a deficiency that we should worry about and can fix, or is it just that's the way life is?
I think that's essentially just the way that life is, that, again, to not have that, you would have to be completely perfect. And again, like 95% of our clients have that if one of our clients doesn't have it, it was probably just that they got lucky that we didn't find it, and that's why, because again, that nobody's perfect. So again, I wouldn't be too concerned about it, that it's pretty common from what we see.
Chad, I think you commented on this, but you're a little bit muffled, so I might have missed some of it. In the findings, material weakness, and I know we get this as common every year. What's the definition of material as far as government accounting? Is there a certain $10,000? Is that material or? So that's one question. What's the definition for material?
So basically, on page 139, like towards the bottom, the second to last paragraph, it kind of talks about the definition of what's a significant deficiency in a material weakness. Basically, when we get the books, that we set a scope, and because we say, okay, anything below this dollar amount, we don't care, because we're putting reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance. And because absolute assurance, it would take years to audit the financial statements. So we say, okay, anything below a certain dollar amount, we find is immaterial and would not skew the users of the financial statements if the financial statements were off by a certain dollar amount. So if we find journal entries that are above that threshold, then that becomes a material weakness. That if there's journal entries that are kind of below that, but yet there's multiple ones, we got to assess it and then say, okay, is this a significant deficiency or material weakness. So essentially, the difference between the two is just that the material weakness is larger dollar amounts.
And then the second part to that is, so we have that finding every year going back. Do you have a schedule, or do you keep a schedule of what those are? Because you don't find them initially, but wouldn't you find them the next year or not?
Yeah, so it's basically like just, it is kind of the same thing year after year, but yet it's pretty common to be missing those, that it's just, whether there's some accounts receivables that got missed because there were some grant receivables, whether it's some fixed assets, capital assets, projects that weren't capitalized. I guess a common one is accounts payable and like construction contracts, because there's some retainage payable that you hold on to that retainage until the project is approved. And lots of times clients that we see that where they're capturing the contract payable because they have the invoice, but then the retainage part gets missed.
Okay.
And so that is one thing that, you kind of, for future purposes, go over I know that, the last couple of years have had a little bit of turnover in that position, but, we could very easily sit down and say, okay, this is our work papers, this is what we're looking at, that this is something that you can keep an eye out going forward.
The other thing I'll mention is anytime GASB does a change, we're going to have that weakness because we're not aware of the change necessarily. It comes out when you're audited, whether it's to reclassify a certain item, whether it's to reclassify part of your fund balance, any of those times that GASB changes something, which is every year, you'll have that weakness too. And that's the unfortunate side of how this continually changes every time we turn around. At one point in time, we were at GASB 34. Now we're in a GASB 80s. It just keeps coming every year, and it makes it more and more difficult for them to audit as well. But there is a number of times that is what we've missed as well. We've done it the way they told us this year, GASB changed. Now we aren't doing it right the way next year. So you change again, and it just continues down that cycle. I think it keeps Chad employed that way.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. Had one final question. On page 9, there's
I was going to mention that, I'm glad that James brought that up, because there is going to be a very significant change come FY22. It's dealing with leases, and we just made a small note of it in the notes section that I had skipped over on page 76, the prospective accounting change that GASB 87 will be in effect for next year. And so I don't even know the whole, all the details to it yet. That's going to be something that we're going to be digging into next summer before we get to all the field works and everything. Is that I know we're even purchasing software to help keep track of this new standard, because basically, short, where you would have an operating lease where if you're renting copiers and you're just expensing that as rent expense, now it's actually going to have to go on the balance sheet as a right to use asset. So it's a big change. It's probably one of the bigger changes since the VIPER standard, which was like 2014 or 2015. So that one there will be quite significant, and a lot of work that will go into it to have the financial statements showing that correctly.
It parallels the new rule changes that the SEC and FCC are finding with your bonds. We're going through disclosure. So leases and that all have to be looked at differently. They're all counted as capacity now, where they weren't years ago. And that started in 2019 for us with our bonds. So this is another follow-up as this continues down into the audit. So once it starts there, we'll now face it next year in the audit, and we see these things coming. We're already complying with that on the bond side, but now it'll be with the accounting piece of it through the audit. So kind of saw that coming, didn't think it would hopefully happen, but here it is. Next year we'll deal with that.
Is that what I'm looking at on page 9? There's a note of emphasis of matter. It says the city adopted new accounting guidance related to government accounting standards. Is that got to be changed? We're talking
It's
about
similar, yeah. I mean, each year this is in there as to the new standards we had to adopt as part of the audit. So next year you'll see 87 and others if they come out in time, and that'll state it there as well.
So we moved from 84 to 87?
Yep.
Missed 85.
Yep, 84 was implemented in FY '21, and so that's what that is. And, you know, the city didn't do anything wrong. It was just change in what the standard said, how it needed to be reported. So we had to throw that little blurb in there.
So it sounds like there's recognition on the part of the profession or the auditing bodies that there are so many changes that it's not humanly possible to be perfect. So you term it this really fancy phrase that nobody really understands that says, hey, we expect this. Most people have it, but it doesn't change the validity really of your financial status or the soundness of your accounting. Unless it's a material weakness or a higher level of error or discrepancy. Is that correct? Sort of?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say that because I know some classes that I've gone to, they've talked about, is there potential that they could have big gap and little gap, which just means, you know, the bigger cities, you know, the New Yorks, the LAs, but then could there be a different set of standards for the smaller towns because you guys don't have the resources to be able to be, you know, follow it and be caught up on all of this like they do. And they've talked about that, but they're not going to be going that way. It's going to be a catch-all and make everybody compliant with the same standards.
Other questions from council?
Just appreciate all the time that staff put into this. It's a huge document, very technical and complicated, so I appreciate staff's efforts.
Yeah, there is quite a bit of time that goes into it, and I appreciate, you know, I know James this year had to kind of pick up some of it too because Gina being on maternity leave, but even Gina too with, you know, she started this new position, and so we appreciate that some of the stat tables, it does take a lot of time to get all that information, and so I was just really glad that we were actually able to go to the city versus last year we did it all remote, that it did go a lot smoother this year than last year because of actually being able to physically be there to look at everything.
All right. Thank you very much, Chad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 2 will be a presentation by Christopher Orth from the Farnsworth Group on the 117 First Street Northeast building.
It mirrors automatically. Yeah.
What kind of technical setup here?
Try that one.
Try this one out.
Switch.
Then we gotta hit A. Let's just see if that happens.
Do you have a flash drive that we can get if,
What about using this?
what's that?
What about using that?
Yeah, we can use that.
I can just lay this flat on there.
Okay. We can try that out.
Hopefully there's not too much glare. Apologize.
Let's see if that's gonna work. No, we have the cover off.
There you go.
Look at that.
Let's see, here's Zoom. Council's got it on there.
Yeah. We have it loaded on the system too for council as well.
So they can all save on their computers.
Excellent. Well, good evening. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Christopher Orth again with Farnsworth Group. I'm here to just kind of briefly go over some of the scope that we've gone through with the 117 First Street Northeast building next door. We've developed some visual aids, and I'm just going to kind of walk through those. I think they were in your council packets as well. So this is our floor plan, and it's 3 colors. The blue area is an area that we envision staying in the control of the City of Waverly. It's an area that has the dam controls, the hydroelectrics, and the electrical infrastructure that supports or receives the power from the hydroelectric system. The green area to the bottom of the page is an area that could potentially be developed for some sort of a tenant occupant or something along those lines. Could be a restaurant, could be a retail space, something along those lines. The space to the right, or the what's the larger space on there, listed as future tenant 2, is about 4,300 square feet of space, and again, that one could be developed for some other purpose. The idea here being that we're trying to maintain some of the city areas so that the city can still utilize those functions and the infrastructure that's necessary to control the dam and the hydroelectrics. But the idea that if the building is updated, we would have the opportunity to do something there where you could lease those spaces out. The scope of work that we're exploring, in addition to just separating these spaces out, we're looking at doing some tuck pointing and repair of the existing masonry on the exterior. There are bricks that are deteriorated, that are cracked, that are broken. There's mortar joints that need some attention, and the stonework also has, in particular at the parapets, is missing sealants and is allowing moisture infiltration into the building. There's some structural repairs needed. There's some areas where the foundations are cracked and need to be shored up. They're also allowing, the areas where there's some structural issues are again allowing moisture to get into the building, which is compounding the problem because you have freeze thaw and things of that nature. There are 3 low slope roof areas. So there's the clay tile that you can see from the ground, and then there are areas where there's what's coined as a flat roof, but it's not really flat. But it's what people think of as a flat roof. So it's a rubber membrane roof. And those areas, that roof is more than 20 years old, we believe, and it's significantly deteriorated and needs to be replaced. It's at the end of its useful life. There are also areas around the perimeter of the clay tile roof where the soffits and fascia, so soffit is the vertical surface right below the edge of the roof where your gutter usually sits. Fascia is the area underneath, kind of the under roof edge. Both of those are also deteriorating. The paint's peeling. There's holes. that are, again, allowing moisture and things of that nature. And so we would be working to improve those areas as well. And then the windows and doors, the existing glass block windows, several are broken. There's, again, gaps in the joints where the mortar has deteriorated in those joints. And again, it's allowing moisture and things of that nature to get into the building. And then the other thing is the existing windows, they aren't consistent with the historical nature of the west and south portions of the building, so we would want to restore those to be more historically accurate. The glass block is actually what was originally put into the portion that you see from First Street, but they don't make that particular style of glass block anymore, so we would look to replace it with a more energy efficient glass block to still maintain the look of that 12-inch by 12-inch module. We mentioned separating the areas. We would need to use a fire barrier to separate those occupancy areas, so that's part of the consideration. And then the other consideration is the energy code. And the existing masonry walls really have no insulation in them. They're triple white brick typically, or they have a clay tile involved. So we were recommending that we line the outside of the building with insulation and studs and gypsum board on the inside, drywall, to finish that space and to provide some insulation in that wall, which will make the heating and cooling systems more effective and will require less energy going into those heating and cooling systems to create a comfortable environment. I'm going to scroll on to the next page. This is just to give you a little bit of an idea. On the left is the existing condition, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So it's a photograph of the existing building. So the stone and the brick and the windows are the original, and it's a little bit hard to read, but we've improved the glass block. We've cleaned up the stone. And in this one doesn't have the doors on the north are still going to be those doors. And then when we look at from the southeast corner, again, this is the existing condition. As you can see, it's got a little bit of rough condition. And then we would look to improve that again, where we would clean up the stone, we'd put a new door in that's a little bit more historically accurate, and again, cleaning up up above, you can see the clay tile roof. We would clean that and get that to be a better looking condition than what we're seeing there. And then again, on above the hydroelectric area, again, we would look at replacing the windows and fixing up the soffits and fascia on that part. We're still investigating what we might be able to do to that wall below the building. It's got some significant deterioration, and so we're still working with our engineers, but we've got some money in our budget where we think we can address those concerns. And again, this is looking across the river. Again, the existing condition. These windows are not the historically accurate windows that were in that building originally. So we would look to replace the windows, clean up the soffit and fascia. We do have the louvers that are into the dam control area, and those have to do with the heating and cooling of the dam control. So we are going to try to see if we can find a way to give the appearance of a historical window in front of those louvers, but you're still going to have the louver there behind. So, and that's a functional necessity. In terms of schedule, we've been working on what we would consider the schematic and design development phases, and we're kind of we've wrapped those up. This presentation to you is in preparation for your budget time. And then the hope was to have your approval to proceed sometime maybe toward the end of February, and then we can get into doing our final design documents, where we would have bid documents ready to go sometime in May, June sort of time frame, with the hope that we could start construction possibly as soon as the middle of July. I will say that we've been hearing from roofing contractors that roof insulation and roof membranes are as much as 8 to 10 months out. So if that condition is still in existence in July, they wouldn't be able to put the roof on until possibly the following spring. It's one of those things we're just battling right now. And along that same line, prices are significantly fluctuating, and it's really hard to estimate, but we did have our third-party estimator take a look at this, the scope that I was describing to you, and we're somewhere in the vicinity of about $700,000 worth of construction cost, and total project then with our fees, and then we've also included some fees for Terracon to do some asbestos abatement specifications and bid documents. There is some asbestos present in the building that would be disturbed by our construction, and so that has to be a separate contractor that's specially licensed with the DNR to remove that asbestos-containing material. And so the removal is budgeted up above in the construction cost, but it's a separate consultant. Our liability doesn't allow us to do the design of that abatement removal. We coordinate with them so they understand the scope, but it's a separate consultant. And we've worked with them to establish what their cost would be.
Where would the asbestos removal be in the categories?
It's in Division 02, existing conditions.
Okay.
That's not all of, I mean, it's a portion of that in that 138,000.
So is that assuming bad asbestos or average asbestos?
So they actually went in and did a survey and tested materials to figure out what the
So we
extent
do
is.
know what we're working with. This isn't kind of an unknown, we don't know what's there.
Correct.
You commented that the flat roof portions were at about 20 years old. Can you comment on any other significant work that's been done over the years, if any?
I think that some of the windows that look newer on the building have been replaced probably in the last 20 years. So, for instance, on that view, those side-by-side windows, I think may have been replaced within the last 20 years, but I don't know that for sure.
It's been longer than that. Nothing's been done in 25 years. So the roofing system's more than 25 years old. Windows, all that is more than 25 years old. There was some repair work to the clay roof. Tiles were replaced, and we do have a supply of excess roof tiles in the event that there's a need to do some patchwork there. Other than that, there was some electric space heaters put in to the garage area, but that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
So Christopher, a lot of what you said has to do with the exterior of the building, and then you talked about adding insulation and doing sheetrocking. What about heating and cooling? Is that included in here too?
Right now, we're not planning to do any cooling. The vehicle bay, well, right now the building is fairly open, and so the heaters that are out in this portion, I believe, heat and cool, or heat the whole of the space. This area is all open to that right now. And so our suggestion is that they maintain the heating here until the time when a tenant is identified. And at that time, the heating and cooling would need to be upgraded for the needs of that tenant. A space for storage or even for retail is different than a space for eating and drinking establishments. They have different requirements for fresh air and things of that nature. So we think it's better to wait until a tenant is identified, and so to use the existing system for that space. And then we do have some money in the budget to put some small heaters in the area identified as electrical controls in blue, and the area identified in green, and that's just really more temporarily. We don't want that space to just sit unconditioned. In the wintertime, we want it to be maintained. I think Mike had suggested 50 or 55 degrees. So it's not heating it up to be, home or even an office space, but it's so that it's not ice cold. There is a restroom and some other things like that you would want to have be at a decent temperature if somebody's in there working and that sort of thing in the interim. Because I believe that building, if it isn't already, is going to be vacated.
So this estimate is really to make sure the building is structurally sound, to get sort of the bare bones repairs done so that it is ready for a tenant to come in, look at it, decide what they would want to do further to the space.
Right. Okay. We want to make it so that it's habitable. Right now, I would argue that, with the amount of opportunities for moisture infiltration, that also means there's opportunities for air infiltration. It's really not there today. So that's where I think we're recommending kind of getting the outside envelope stabilized so that it could be habitable for a future tenant.
Well, it needs to be done below ground. I mean, we took a peek at the cellar, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
And does any work need to be done down there?
We're not really identifying work to be done down there. Again, depending on who the tenant is and what their needs are, there's kind of a stair space here, and then there's a kind of a walk area that's maybe 6 or 8 feet wide down this way. I could see where, depending on their plumbing needs for the future, that space may have sewer lines or something like that run in it. But overall, we're not really planning to do any work in that space again until we know what the real needs are. We didn't want to spend a bunch of money that you wouldn't get any value out of down the road. And that tenant stuff tends to be so specific. If it became a brewery, they have some very specific water and drainage needs. If it becomes a bar and grill, they've got different needs. So we were just kind of trying to leave that as a palette that's able to be modified in the future.
But in terms of structural stability, you didn't identify anything in the basement that needed to be done?
No, we did not. Again, the exterior of the dam wall and the wall below, what would be the west wall here, those probably need some attention to the exterior, but we think there's a fair amount of that that's on the surface.
I mean, you think that's more aesthetic rather than
I don't know that
crumbling and
well, no, I think there is some crumbling and stuff that probably needs some
shoring up,
repair. The problem is if it's been patched in the past, it may be a more significant repair this time. You may have to remove more material and patch in that nature. But I think the bones and the foundation of the building, there are some specific areas that are having some issues, but overall I think it's okay. This southwest corner has a fairly significant crack through it. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to work to try and remedy.
So what are your thoughts? I mean, this is a major investment, and so do you think it's an attractive space potentially? I don't know how to say it other than, do you think it's worth this investment?
I don't know if I'm qualified to offer the economic, it really is going to depend on if you find a long-term tenant that can use the space. So it's really hard for me to advise you in that way. A 4,350 square foot building in downtown, in a historic building, I could see where it would have kind of some interesting opportunities, but that doesn't mean that somebody else thinks that way. And so it's really about finding a right fit, but I'm not sure you're going to sell that to somebody in its current condition. That would be my only offering to you, is that if I was walking into a leaky building and those kinds of things, I'd be thinking twice about wanting to invest on the interior of that building until that stuff was taken care of.
And so if we invest this and restore the building, how long do you think that restoration will last? When will we be looking at another set of major repairs?
We didn't really evaluate the clay tile. that, had been done within the last time frame, and it was said that it was sound at this point. It's not leaking, it's not causing issues. So I would think there's no reason to think that you couldn't have 25 or 30 more years out of a new roof. We can specify a 20-year warranty, or we can specify a 30-year warranty. It's essentially assurance policy as to, there's some improvements in the detailing and the durability of the material if you go to the 30-year warranty. So, that's what I would probably advise, because it's a public building and you're going to own it probably that long. So I would think you would invest that kind of effort into it, because otherwise you're back here in 20 years replacing that roof, because it's probably going to be in a similar condition.
You're talking about the rubber membrane roof?
Yes,
yeah.
Correct. Windows, I think those have at least that sort of a life expectancy. And if we get the other areas where you have moisture infiltration, I can't say that some other moisture infiltration issue may not present itself in the near future, but I would certainly think that these repairs would be sound for that 25 to 30 year sort of time frame.
Bill, could you share with us any insight from the economic development standpoint? I know there have been conversations about, several people have commented that they'd really like to see us ramp up our use of the river and so on. Do you see, what would your dream be for this area?
Well, I'll tell you that across the state, people are reusing all kinds of different shapes and sizes of buildings, creatively reusing those historic spaces, and it's really a very popular thing to do. People like it. They like the look of it. They like that how it enhances the downtown. It really is going to depend upon what kind of tenants you can find. Maybe you find two different kinds of tenants because you might have two different spaces. We don't know yet until we really put it out there and say, okay, we're going to do this, so if you're excited about this, come see us. Because that's really how it's going to, if they see that we're putting new windows and that we're doing the walls and we're doing the roof, then you're going to have people who are interested, because if the people that came through before and saw what it was like, they're not going to be that interested in the cost. There's still going to be significant cost for anybody that is a tenant or an owner that comes into that space, and so we're doing the basic outer spaces.
That's the challenge I see. You got 4,200 or whatever, 4,300 square feet to lease out. I mean, at 15 a foot, that's 65K a year. Maybe you get a little bit more on triple net, but that's whatever. Seems like a tough deal there, but some of this expense has to be done anyway.
What's the plan for moving forward on this? Are we going to be discussing this when we're talking about the budget sessions?
Absolutely. We don't have $1 million sitting aside hoping to spend it on something. This is all going to have to be looked at a budget and prioritized with the other things that we have, which there's not many. But we were also looking at our borrowing. Do we do that this year? Do we not? So it's all going to be part of the overall discussion, the budget. It just has to be. I think, in Matt's comment, there is some of this work we had to do no matter what. If we would have stayed in it and not finished the other side of the Public Works building, we had to get the roof fixed. We had to get the tuck pointing and starting separating the mortar joints. That stuff was coming no matter what. Now it's, can you preserve it? It's on the National Historic Registry. It's over a 100-year-old building. It looks like a brewery out in Milwaukee. It just looks like that aura when you look at it, and whether or not that's what it'll be, it's one of the cooler buildings in this area. When you look at it and you look at the restoration, it could be, especially on the river, that huge concrete patio area. There's a lot of potential, and there are people that have talked about, if you ever get to looking rid of that, just let us know. Talk is cheap. We'll see what happens if we actually move forward with it, but that'll come down to you guys when it gets to budget Saturday. We'll have to decide what's it look like, what's it do to the financials, where are you at, what do you want to see? Because Chris has said, this is part of it. That concrete is the unknown. That's the big one that we really don't know what that's going to take yet, so.
Well, and it's not like, I mean, if you want to restore the building, it's not like you can do a couple of spot repairs. It needs help in multiple areas, so.
And they're all kind of contributing
Yeah.
factors, right? So
Yeah.
we could replace the roof, but if we don't work on the stone parapet, you
Doesn't
haven't really
matter.
fixed the problem because the moisture's getting in through the parapet right behind the roof. And then it's creating other issues with the brick and spalling and the joints and things of that nature. And that's just going to continue until you get that kind of moisture resistant.
Christopher, you did mention in passing the one of the concerns that I had, which was the southwest corner where there's some fairly major cracks and some settling and things. How big of an issue do you think that is? You really didn't address whether that is something that could cause, that you have identified as a fixable problem?
Our structural engineer has looked at it and does believe that there's a solution to fix it. It's kind of two steps. And the second step is more involved, but I believe that we've got, funds in our budget to address that at this point. But there's some additional investigative work with some geotechnical, seeing what the ground is supporting in that space, seeing if the ground has let go in that area, and if that's caused that crack to occur. So there's a little bit more effort to be done, but it's more of the detailed design sort of effort so that we can design the solution.
Okay, so it's, if I may rephrase that, it's that it isn't that we feel that the building is having issues with its structural integrity, is we feel there's a solution, we just haven't completely designed what the solution is yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Is it difficult to find companies that do this type of restoration on historic buildings?
There can be challenges, and there tend to only be a couple. Good tuck pointing companies, I think there's 2 or 3 that work in the state of Iowa. So that there's a lot of historic buildings around, and even non-historic buildings, when they get to be of a certain age, they need that sort of attention. So there is a limited pool. I haven't contacted, Seedorf Masonry in Strawberry Point is a great mason, and they may be involved in, a company like that could be involved in doing a lot of the brick repair work. I don't know to the extent that they do true tuck pointing, but some of this work is going to be removing a section of brick because there's a 4-foot by 16-inch area that needs to be removed and replaced because the face of the brick is peeling off. And so you can't address that by just gluing it back on. You need to actually remove it and replace it and make sure that everything around it is sound.
I'm not saying this because I'm in favor of it, but just to clarify, worst case scenario, am I understanding correctly, it's not an option to do nothing and just let this building go because we have to have it for the operation of the dam. Is that correct?
Some of it, yes. I mean, the portion that houses the dam controls is a small portion of this. When you look at the picture that Chris has up, it's a very small portion of it. You let the rest of it kind of fall around it, you can. It's not advisable, but yes, with the hydros that are still in operation and the controls to the dam, that western area has to be preserved somehow so we can access it and be able to maintain those. So it's not something we could move or change easily at all. It's a very expensive option if we look at that, to remove that from that building and put it somewhere else. The hydros could be decommissioned, taken out. There's been some talk. They don't really generate as much as they used to. So, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about those pieces of the building too. And if that does happen, that changes the footprint of this immensely. But we don't know if that'll be the case yet or not. That's kind of a utilities issue they have to work through. So, but right now, yes, we do need to preserve part of it just to access our own area that we have to have for the dam controls.
I was looking at this if we phased it into 2, but I mean, the majority of this is there.
Yeah, the timing will be the issue, as Christopher said. You know, when you're talking about supply chain issues that are very distinct and unique for this kind of a building, if the roof doesn't come in, you really can't do anything else. I mean, you don't want to do the internal fiberboard net when the roof is leaking, nor do you want to continue to tuck point walls that are seeping. So really, the key is the roof. And if it's 10 months out, you may not get this done until fiscal '24. So that's why it's hard to know what this really looks like. And I don't know if we'll have a real quick answer on that either as to what that time frame would look like. So you can plan and plan, but in the end, it may push off because we don't have a choice. It's going to be truly supply and demand of some of these unique vendors.
At this point, the time we've been hearing is 10 months on multiple projects that we've bid in the last month. So at this point, it's 10 months. Could it improve? Yes. Could it get worse? Yes. I don't know what to tell you what's going to happen in July when we bid this. I just don't have that crystal ball to tell you, unfortunately. I wish I could.
So as far as budgeting, we would be budgeting it into next year, obviously, next fiscal year. If it were pushed back even to fiscal year '24, if we budget it this year and it has to, or for the next year and it has to delay 1 year, that's not a big deal on the budget so much.
It actually is, though. When you look at the bonds and the requirements we have,
that was maybe my questions. What happens if we have to
expend
bond
that
for
funding in a certain amount of time? Now, granted, it's a small enough amount. I think we're exempt from that, but I still don't like to have that funding just sit.
Right.
We're trying this year to clean up all the different bonds we've had and the remnants of it, and try and get all of our funds taken care of. And I think we're pretty close. We've got it almost all resolved. So we probably are exempt from the federal requirement for that, but I still don't know if I want to continue to hold that out there. But unless you actually commit to it and have funding so it can be bid, it really is a rock and hard place.
Because if you wait, then, I mean, it sounds like it's probably going to bridge 2 fiscal years.
It very well could. And that's not an issue. It's just, how long are we talking? When we start, I don't have the map up, Christopher, so when we start the process and we're able to move forward, how long a time frame is it to kind of complete what you've discussed?
We showed about 2.5 months to pull together the bid documents. And during that time frame, we can certainly reach out to some contractors and kind of get their pulse and see if those supply chain issues have changed or if that's still kind of holding true at that point in time. If the 8 to 10 months holds true and you bid it and you award it and they can start in July, you would, in theory, be putting that new roof on in May when the weather's cooperating, and you would be just fine to have expended that in fiscal year '23.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that was my concern is contracts, we can negotiate that it's materials aren't coming in, so they have to be pushed back. It'd be the bonds that would be the concern if we let a bond for it. And
I think we're exempt because of the amount. Unless there was a lot of other stuff we want to go crazy and bond for this year, you hit that $5 million, I think it's $5 million threshold is when it gets a little more serious. I think under that, we're exempt from that requirement, but still, I can check with that, and we'll have that by Saturday when you get a little more discussion.
Are there any other sources of funding for renovation projects like this? Grants or economic development or?
I actually looked in, there's probably about 2 or 3 of them that depend upon how the ownership is. So this is going to be a creative thing that we're going to try to work with because in the normal world, you might be able to condoize and do some things that way. That doesn't work so much with a government and a private entity. Could we sell it to somebody and then reserve a permanent, part of that building for our purposes? We just have to find out how that all works because some of the grants don't apply to governments. So we can't apply for some of them. Some of them can be applied for by the tenant or by the owner, the private owner. So there may be some available still anyway, but there's some challenges because we have to keep some kind of presence in that building.
So there might be more of an opportunity once it's renovated for whoever decides to be a tenant in that space as a private person.
Right. If they should be able to negotiate that with us in that sense that we're taking the risk more than they are taking the risk if they buy the building. So in some ways that may help some potential interested parties to come forward because they won't have to put the expense of doing the building like we're doing.
Right.
I think you look at the historical tax credits we've gotten for some projects for private owners, there's a lot of that. There's federal grants, some for preservation. Again, it's a historical building, built in 1915, do you know offhand? We established it, you know, Mike, it's about there?
About the square section was done later, you know, with a diesel generator.
That was done in the 30s, late 30s.
So there is some sources of funding, whether or not we apply, they're competitive, you know, we'd have to look at that, but we've had some success with, you know, the historic tax grants from the state, the feds. I think it's just a matter of do you want to move forward or not, and how do we accomplish that? And we'll definitely have that discussion on Saturday, among others, so we just want to kind of have Christopher be able to at least let you see what it could look like, what it might cost, and this is all without knowing the concrete foundation repairs, but it's just a starting point, so you can at least see what we're dealing with.
Further discussion? Thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Move to item 3, which would be Resolution 2205, a resolution approving change order number 1 and approving pay application number 11 for the Public Services Center North Addition 2021 project. We have a motion.
I'll move approval of Resolution 22-05, approving change order number 1 in the amount of $11,106.87, increase and improving pay application number 11 in the amount of $87,432.18 to Cresco Building Service Incorporated of Cresco, Iowa for the Public Services Center North Addition 2021 project.
Second.
Motion by Meyers, second by Birgen. Council discussion.
I just had a question on, a procedural question really, on these change orders, and I know we talked about this at the last meeting or the meeting before, but when these items come up on a change order, who is the entity that actually decides whether something will be changed or not changed? I understand what happens if there's a hole to be filled and the hole ends up being larger than what it was anticipated, or you know, we thought we were going to need X number of cubic feet or cubic yards or something, and we ended up only needing Y cubic. I understand that, but when I'm looking at change order here, there are some things like delete 12 arrows and reflective particles in the pavement. Is the architect that makes those decisions on whether those things should be deleted or added? Is it city staff that makes those decisions? Is it the contractor that makes those decisions? Because this has already been done. So we're just basically approving things that have already been done. Correct.
If you would like.
All of the above. Okay. It is very much a team effort. And James has been involved in some of them as well. Probably not the pavement markings with the arrows.
Missed that one.
Was involved in.
So for 11, they want 12. What are you going to do?
For instance, we had a camera that we were looking at reusing. The camera was bad. And so it also would not, so we looked at a couple different options. We looked at a single lens camera and a multi-lens camera, and again, a group discussion, it was decided that the best thing going forward would be the multi-lens camera. So, you know, that's how this stuff is kind of decided in order to keep the project moving along in a very timely manner. I guess if there was something far more significant or substantial, we would certainly look at you know, making the council aware of those situations. But a lot of these are, we kind of look at them as more as field adjustments. They don't really change the scope of the project itself.
Well, I understand that. I mean, this is $11,000 total of the change order on a $1.9 million project. That's infinitesimal. I understand that. But I just want to make sure that the council is not irrelevant to the process, that when there are things that require substantive decisions, that those kinds of decisions are brought to the council before something actually is changed. And I know that's not typically, probably never does that happen, but I just want to throw out a word of caution that if there are things that would require a substantive change, that be presented to the council before the change is actually made, rather than ex post facto.
And what threshold do you consider substantive? These are all $3,000 to $5,000 increments, up, down, here and there. As you said, you have a dozen or so that net out to $10,000 on a $2 million project.
Anything that I would be upset about not finding out in advance.
Good answer.
Okay.
No, it's a judgment thing. If somebody would be upset that there was, 2 doors instead of 3 doors, or
Sure.
Something that had a substantive impact. I can't tell you what that would be, because it's really one of those things that you would have to take a look at, and
You'll know it when you see it.
yeah, you'll know it when you see it. It's not a substantive thing. It's a
Well, and we're probably the last people to look at it, right? I mean, I would imagine that either Justin or Mike or somebody's walking through the project, and if there's the wrong number of garage doors, they're figuring all that out.
Right.
So,
and I don't want to be involved in every single decision like that. It's just that we have the responsibility to approve these changes, and I sometimes feel a little uncomfortable as a council member approving them after the fact. And I don't have any issue with any of these changes that are on this. Like I said, they're pretty minor. But if there was something that was substantive and we weren't given the ability to approve it, I would be concerned. So I'm just throwing it out there as a caution, that if there is something that city staff might feel would be substantive, that somebody on the council might have an issue with, that maybe a heads up before the fact would be appreciated.
Well, I've always kind of looked at, if it's 5,000 or over, it's got to come through me to look at as well, and then we kind of gauge, is it something you're going to need to see. If you look at an adjustment on the driveway or something like that, if you walked up and looked at it, you'd have no idea it was even done. And that's where I look at, is it really substantive or not? If it's missing a door, if it's a different window, if the roof line changes, those are obvious ones that of course have to come back. And they're design issues that are going to be far beyond $4,000 or $5,000. So that's why these are just smaller up and down, that at some point in time we said, we've accumulated enough of these, we need to get it to you to approve the stock of them as they've gone up, down, all over the place. And that's what we've brought today. So I understand what you're saying. We'll try and be very cognizant of that going forward. But we are usually bringing you pretty minor changes, net up, down, and in the end, like I said, it's $11,000. If any one of these would have been 10, 11 by itself, we probably would have thought, do we need to at least have that discussion? But it's just a net of, well, I mean, this is the first one and the building's done.
This is the first and last.
This is it. So this is your
That's
entire
pretty
list
good.
of stuff for the $2 million project.
The only thing left for payment is retainage.
Yep.
So there are, Christopher, we are waiting for some warranty information and closing documents and paperwork to be filed.
Correct.
Otherwise, if things go well, maybe February 21st, we will be finalizing the project.
This is Christopher's fault as well, this one. Like just the other building, he's got this one too.
If I may.
Sure.
I'd just like to say, all of these items were reviewed with city staff before the contractor was authorized to proceed. So what happens is, either in the field we notice something, or the contractor notices something, brings it to our attention, we come up with what the solution is, we then run the cost proposed past city staff and get their approval or their acknowledgement. And again, whether it's informal or whether it's formal, most of the time there's a trust factor with city staff that they have the authority to do some of this because of the expediency of the project. And again, we didn't want to bother you with every $2,500 change on this project, up or down. So that's pretty common. And whether it's a percentage of the total or whether it's a dollar figure, maybe that's something you want to have a conversation about. But doing it this way works pretty well in the construction world.
And I realize a lot of these changes have to be made kind of on the fly. They can't wait for public notice and 3 weeks later to have it in front of the council and that kind of thing. So I fully understand that. Partly I just wanted to know, because we do have, they're very common that these change orders apply in just about every single contract we have, and I understand the reason for them. I guess I just wanted to understand what the procedure is when these things come up, and I'm glad to hear that they are in discussion with city staff and that they're approved by multiple people. And I would not expect, I don't think anyone here in the council wants to have to approve every single couple, small item, and I appreciate that. But my concern was I wanted to know what the process was, who actually approved these, to make sure that city staff was actually being consulted before these things were being approved, and that if there is something that is substantive and staff feels that there might be an issue with it, that they feel comfortable coming to the council and saying, should we approve this or not approve it. More that we have your back rather than we're looking over your shoulder.
Sure, absolutely.
And my experience with staff would be that if there was a substantive change, that would have come.
No problem bringing you bad news.
And James,
the way it is.
Right, as an internal control, $5,000 or more hits your desk?
That's what I try to look at. If it's 5 or less, we'll still glance at it, but I'm not as concerned because, again, the size of the project and some of these quantities you move anymore, it's not a whole lot to get to $4,000 or $5,000. Right. At $5,000, we'll take a little harder look. That's where I'll be involved in the threshold part of it, and then we'll start to see what is it exactly. And that goes back to Rod's point. Is it material? Is it extra? Is it less? How does it work? Or is it truly a change in the actual design or something with the foundation or anything like that? Then we'll put it on specifically to come before you. So it's usually 5 or less. You look at all these. The 12,000, I would decrease. I thought you'd be good with that, so we kind of let that one go. But overall, Mike's been very cognizant of this. He's been on top of this whole project start to finish. And you have Christopher, you have the other engineers, you have a group out there that is truly watching all of this to make sure it's done right. Because nobody wants to come back and redo it, especially over a few $1,000s. Right.
So what does staff think of the building? And when do we get to tour it?
To be decided, I guess.
I just wanted to make one comment, kind of to piggyback on these others, I guess. In my business, obviously, it's a completely different scale, but I would say on virtually every project that we do, remodel or new construction, there are going to be change orders. For me, that although it can be a little bit nebulous sometimes, but if a change order comes about because something unexpected happened, we deal with that and we understand that's what happens. If a change order comes about because somebody didn't do their homework or the client wasn't given realistic expectations or whatever, that's more of a problematic change order. And I don't know how we as council members can discern everything that comes across us that way, but I think that's somewhat of a good indicator. Did somebody drop the ball on this, or is it just life?
Well, I'll tell you if it's our fault. If it's not our fault, you'll know. It's something we'll just deal with, but no, we appreciate the comment.
Okay. Roll call vote.
Birgen,
Yes.
Drenkow,
Yes.
Kangas,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Rathe,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Beaufore,
Yes.
Vote is 7-0. Resolution 2205 passes. Resolution 2206 is item number 4. It's a resolution approving change order.
Oh, come on. Really? Right after? Holy cow, Tim.
This is a decrease.
Yeah. We don't get upset about these.
My apologies.
Resolution approving change order number 1, accepting the 3rd Street Southeast Bridge Removal 2021 project complete and approving pay estimate number 3 as the final pay request. Do we have a motion?
I will move approval of Resolution 22-06, approving change order number 1 in the amount of a $2,994.65 decrease, accepting the 3rd Street Southeast Bridge Removal 2021 project as complete, and approving pay estimate number 3 in the amount of $10,303.80 as a final pay request to Minowa Construction Inc. of Harmony, Minnesota.
Second.
Moved by Drenkow, seconded by Beaufore. Council discussion. Anybody want to get on James for lowering the cost?
Just glad it's done.
No discussion. We'll go ahead and go to a roll call vote.
Drenkow?
Yes.
Kangas?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Rathe?
Yes.
Schneider?
Yes.
Beaufore?
Yes.
Bergen?
Yes.
A vote of 7 yeses, 0 noes. Resolution 2206 passes. Item number 5 is a resolution 2207, a resolution directing city staff to prepare an amendment to the Waverly City Code that would permit vehicles known as utility task vehicles, or UTVs, to be operated on public streets by licensed drivers within the city of Waverly.
I will move this resolution 2207, directing city staff to prepare an amendment or amendments to the Waverly City Code for consideration by the council at its regular meeting scheduled for February 21, 2022, that would permit vehicles known as utility task vehicles, or UTVs, that meet reasonable permitting and safety requirements to be operated on public streets by licensed drivers within the city of Waverly.
Second.
Moved by Drenkow, seconded by Beaufort. Let's go ahead and have discussion on this.
Yeah, let me open this because I'm the person who basically requested this be put on the agenda, and I'm the primary author of the resolution. There probably have been some language cleaned up in it, I'm not sure, but the intent that I had for submitting this resolution for consideration by the council tonight is I felt that it was only fair that we, as a council, provide an up or down vote on this UTV issue. It's been hanging out there for a number of months. People are asking where we're at with it, if we're going to proceed or not proceed, and I think it's only fair that we actually have a council vote whether we want to go ahead and do something or that we basically say, no, we're not going to. The intent of this resolution is to set a date, and hopefully February 21st is far enough away for staff to do some investigating and drafting on this. If not, we can always put that off a little bit longer. If this resolution is passed, that we would actually take a look at a change in the city ordinance, which I would assume would take 3 readings, Bill? I believe so. To pass this?
Yes.
So there's plenty of time to really have substantive discussion on it. My intention here was just to put this out in front of the council to say, is this something that we want to take a look at moving forward with, or is this something that the majority of the council says, no, we don't?
I have one question. I've been frustrated because I've tried, I feel, given a real sincere effort to try to fully educate myself on all the pros and cons of this, and have been frustrated by my failure to do so. I spent several hours trying to find studies that would give some factual data about safety issues and noise issues and those kinds of things, and I can't find anything out there. So my question is, if we were to draft an ordinance, and if it were to pass to allow UTVs to operate on city streets, is it a possibility to do so on a trial basis? Like, say, we're going to try this for a year or whatever. Is that even an option?
You'd have to pass an ordinance, and then you'd have to
rescind it.
Rescind it.
Okay. So you can't pass an ordinance and say, we're going to try this.
Well, you can. You can do an ordinance that says we're going to enact it now. And then you can, by your discussion, say, in a year, we're going to see where we're at. And then somebody might bring it up that we want to go the other way again.
Sort of like with
Can't
fireworks.
automatically add a sunset into the ordinance.
I haven't seen anybody do it that way.
No, I haven't either.
Yeah.
Okay.
there are also options that have to be decided, as to how you allow it to happen and whether you restrict different roads.
Well,
or if you
and
do
my
things.
question, because we have permitted golf carts, but we haven't really restricted golf carts.
Not yet.
Other than off of Bremer and off of the highways. They're not allowed, they can cross them, but they can't ride on them. And as far as the state is concerned, golf carts are they considered any different than these in terms of they're not really off-road vehicles, but, depending on how you golf, you really can be off-road quite a bit on some of them.
I don't know that the state has an opinion on golf carts themselves like they do on the off-road vehicles.
And something else that popped in my mind was, after this weekend and others, is what are the rules on like snowmobiles within the city and operating? I mean, they're not probably on the roads very often, but what is our rule for within city right-of-way or traveling in that? I know in some rural places, some of the kids will ride their snowmobiles to school in the wintertime. I don't think that's an issue at Waverly, but again, it kind of encompasses a larger concept of what are all of these different transportation methods that are out there that maybe don't fall under an umbrella that the state has even necessarily put a full consideration on, because we had a discussion about scooters and the rental, by the hour little scooters. There you could get, Segways haven't made it really into Iowa, but there are all these different types of modes of transportation that could be coming in that we have different people, and there's not really a way to, or maybe there is, to craft an ordinance that covers all of it. But at the same time, we have things like the state telling us that a bicycle needs to be considered like a vehicle and they have the right to be on a road. But they're certainly far less safe than a golf cart, which is far less safe than a UTV in terms of some of the roll cage or something that are built into some of these. So it's this interesting dynamic of all of these different things, and how do we rate one over the other versus this versus that. And we have these competing interests coming to us and saying, well, I would like to be able to use mine. Can I, somebody else will come in and say, well, I've got this, can I use this? And,
We hear the argument that golf carts can do this, and we kind of reflect what the state has said, and basically said if you want to do it, you can do it. The city can let it happen, and they don't really do a whole lot of how it's going to look. And I look at the acts, and this started in 1982. And if I remember the 1982 era, the golf carts were like three-wheeled, one-handled things, and you're lucky if you got your golf clubs on the back. And now you've got stereos and music and fully built out things that are a lot different than they were then. And our law still kind of looks back at 1982, I think. So I do think it's a challenge when you have alternative type vehicles, alternative type transportation that wants to compete with trucks and cars and multiple lanes and speed and the fact that our vehicles are pretty good about ignoring the safety of pedestrians and bicycles and alternative type vehicles, because they're bigger and they don't tend to like to watch out for others. But
and you have a large population of golf riders that want to use their golf vehicles more as transportation modes than just get to the golf course, which I think is something council will have to address at some point. Maybe this is the start of it, but to the point of snowmobiles and golf carts, how these got into ordinance. I mean, it's legal to run snowmobiles according to city code in city limits under certain conditions. And that got there because there was a group of passionate snowmobile riders that said, hey, here's how we want to do this, and here's how we want to do this safely. I imagine the same thing went down with the golf cart ordinance, that, hey, we've got a bunch of users that want to do this, and they want to do this safely. Here we are today, we've got UTV users, they want to do this, and they want to do it safely. I don't think it's a huge number, though. Most of the council heard from a number of people. But I do think they're going about it the right way. It's very difficult for us to say, well, it's not safe. It's very difficult to make a safety safety argument on this because it contradicts everything else. So I understand the point of maybe a temporary thing, and because there is a little bit of uneasiness with this. But again, I'm going to vote yes on this because it's real simple. We've got a group of citizens that want to do this safely, and I think we need to let them show us how the golf carts should operate, and then we copy that code, or some of it, perhaps for golf.
Well, I think, isn't it true, if I read Chief Purcell's memo correctly, that it would be illegal for these vehicles to drive on a state highway, so they would not be able to drive on Bremer Avenue, which is Highway 3, or on 4th Street, which is Highway 130 or something like that?
116.
So no matter what we did as a city, the state law would trump that. So we would not be able to allow UTVs to drive on those, on Bremer Avenue or on 4th Street. I think that the Parkway is not a state highway, so they would probably be able to drive on that unless we specifically prohibited them from driving on the Parkway. But I'm thinking most of the other streets in Waverly, the speed limits are going to be 25 or 35 miles an hour. So we're not talking about a huge disparity in speeds, which is the issue that you have if you're out on a highway or out on a county blacktop where you've got a vehicle that might be driving 30 or 35 miles an hour, and you got another vehicle that's driving 60 or 70 miles an hour and coming at them from over a hill or something like that. So I'm not sure that the speed issue concerns me quite so much. The two concerns that I have on this are safety and noise. I think that there are some real concerns about safety, but these vehicles certainly have more safety features than a golf cart does. They probably don't have as many safety features as a car does. And, if they were involved in an accident, and I know that there was a UTV that was involved in an accident yesterday, I think, where they were plowing snow and were hit by a vehicle. It's probably not going to be a good situation for the people riding in the UTV. On the other hand, the people that are driving the UTVs have to assume some risk. They know that they're driving in it. They're not driving in a, really strongly built vehicle that's going to take a crash that, they're accepting that risk of the chance of greater injury if they're driving on these. I'm not sure that I want to substitute my judgment to say, no, this is a dangerous thing, you can't do it. The other thing that bothers me probably even more is the noise, particularly where I live. Motorcycles and pickups are horrendous. Obviously, they're totally ignoring the noise ordinance. I assume we have a noise ordinance in town. They're certainly not paying any attention to that. And the last thing I want to do is add another layer of noise to that situation. But and that might be something that we'd have to look at a year from now and say, these are really noisy. We've gotten a lot of complaints. We're going to have to pull the plug on this. But I would hope that the people who would be operating these are going to be operating them in a way that's, respectful of other people's peace and quiet. We have a lot of other things that make noise. So that causes me some concern, probably the noise more than the safety. But I truthfully don't feel comfortable substituting my judgment for the judgment of the people that are driving this. If I can't pin a specific reason why I don't think this should be done, then I feel that it's necessary for us to let people do it.
Well, I will say my big hurdle, the thing I cannot get past, is the manufacturer's recommendation. The manufacturers of these UTVs explicitly say these are not for use on paved roads. And that, to me, is something that makes it hard for me to get behind UTVs driving on our streets. Now, Again, I've been contacted as much as everybody else. They have made the case that they can put on, hard tires made for city streets. But I don't think it's fair to expect our police officers to look at a UTV and know, does it have the right kind of tires for driving on city streets? They've made the case that you can put, mufflers and noise suppressants on your UTVs. But again, I fear that it becomes kind of an unenforceable responsibility on our police officers. The big, one of the important statistics or pieces of information is what's the top speed for a golf cart versus what's the top speed for a UTV. Most golf carts are traveling at about 12 miles per hour, while most UTVs are traveling at about 35 miles per hour, kind of their average speed. So if you're talking about safety, I would agree that a golf cart at 12 miles per hour and a UTV at 12 miles per hour, that UTV is safer if you're traveling at the same speed. But if you're traveling at average speeds, or if you have a golf cart at 12 miles per hour and a UTV at 36 miles per hour, 3 times as fast, I'm not convinced that the UTV is safer than a golf cart at 12 miles per hour. I mean, you can talk about the roll cage and the sturdier construction, but you're also not comparing them at the same speeds. And I think that's an important consideration. The one argument that I do agree with on the UTVs is this becoming kind of a class issue, that you have our people who are living down the country club driving their golf carts down to golf, and then you've got the UTV people who are the people who are out roading down at the farm, and we seem to have different classes of rules for those different people. And my response is, I think we should be looking at our rules for the golf carts. I'm not a big fan of making more allowances for UTVs on our city streets, but I would like to relook at our golf carts and make sure that they're being used responsibly, that we don't have people who are, driving them for joyrides, or, there's some story about people drinking and going to the parade. I think that we should crack down a little bit on those golf carts, but I don't think the solution is to get UTVs out on our streets and, more and more different types of vehicles driving around. I don't think it's going to make our streets safer. So.
The comparison between golf carts and UTVs, I really think that the golf carts, yes, they might be a little bit slower, but, when I see 2, 3, 6 people on a golf cart driving down the road, and they go I'm pretty sure they go a little faster than 12 miles per hour, without the proper, flags. It's hard for me to, when we have this ordinance with the golf carts, to not say, well, the UTVs probably are a little bit safer because they do have seat belts, roll cages, and such. And so I can't say, well, no, why should we say no to UTVs? I feel that we should be able to allow them, like Rod said, but the golf carts definitely is something that we need to take a look at for safety. Even if they're both or one is going faster, I think golf carts are still a lot more unsafe. And I see or hear of accidents with golf carts as well, including ATVs. There's a lot of accidents with ATVs as well. And it really comes down to, it's hard to enforce some of these things with the golf carts as well, because literally they zoom by my house all the time. And if I call the police saying, hey, there's this person doing whatever on a golf cart, by the time they get there, they're gonna be gone. It's like this, it's so quick, kind of like fireworks. Hey, there's something going on next door, bam, gone. It's really hard to enforce. But I really do see a safety issue with the golf carts. Literally, kids hanging off golf carts, kids driving golf carts very fast down the street. And again, it's really hard to enforce. So at least with UTVs, there are seat belts, and as long as people follow the rules and license, insurance, registration, they're probably a lot safer than the activity that I see with the golf carts. That's an assumption.
So I'm undecided on this issue. I think the one value I can see to taking this to the next level is it does allow for public comment. I've certainly heard from people who are opposed to UTVs. People have been sending the news clippings about various people being severely injured in the last few months. And you know, there are many things people do that are dangerous. We do allow people to fire off explosives, which is dangerous, but we've allowed that. And certainly, I think for the most part, the people who have contacted us who are UTV owners are really model owners. You know, they care about this. They're very passionate about it. They enjoy doing it. And, you know, we had the pleasure of going to visit some people, and they have all the safety features that you could imagine. Not every UTV owner is like that, right? Just like not every golf cart owner is responsible. And it sounds like from what people have told us, people drink and drive golf carts. They are not going to the golf course. They're you know, trick-or-treating or doing whatever on a golf cart, and it's dangerous. So I can't see looking at the UTV issue without addressing the golf cart ordinance. It's too vague, in my opinion. And plus, we could use the rent down at the golf course, so maybe people just need to store their golf carts at the course and get there some other way. But you know, like someone else said, I think it was Brian, I really have an issue with the fact that the manufacturer says you're not supposed to use them on paved roads. And I wonder what that's going to do to the city's liability when somebody does get in an accident. How are we going to be held responsible for that? I also think that we will be an island by approving this. You know, they can't drive them on state highways. They can't drive them on paved county roads. And so it does make it a challenge to get to town in your UTV. People have said, well, we want to come to town, you know, to go to bars, heaven forbid, and drink and then get back on our UTV. But, you know, to run errands, to do other things. We've heard from people who would find it useful because they have a disability and it would be easier to get around and go to events. And so I can certainly understand that point of view, but it's going to make it a bit trickier to get to town if you can't come on a paved road, and it'll make it a bit trickier if you can't travel on a highway. And I don't know that they should be allowed on the Parkway, which is a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, and I think if there is an impact crash, that's going to be bad if you're in a UTV. You know, so I think that I'm undecided on whether this should be allowed, but those are the sticking points that I have when I think about the issue. But I don't see the harm in going to the next step and having staff prepare something other than it's going to take staff time. I do think that if we would allow it, there needs to be a process where these vehicles are inspected, and at least at some point, whether it's annually or however often it's advised, someone is inspecting them and making sure that they do have the safety equipment and the features that would make them as safe as possible on our streets, because I think that, you know, it's most likely that accidents probably will happen, although we don't hear about calamitous golf cart accidents, even though people are using them irresponsibly. So
They might not be reported.
right, I'm sure they're not, yeah. But anyhow, so those are the issues that come up for me.
One thing I wanted to address about UTVs and being allowed on paved county roads. So there is a bill in the Iowa legislature, HF 800, where they're considering that.
Changing that, yeah.
Right. So I don't know if it's a sort of thing where we may want to wait until that is decided on before we act, because that may affect whether or not we want to do this, is whether or not people, as you say, if we're an island or not. But that is certainly a consideration, is what happens to that bill. It's worth being aware that that's happening at the state level.
And I think that's coming like in 2 days.
The discussion, at least
The
in the
discussion,
subcommittee, I think. someone.
Yeah, I think it's still in
State's
subcommittee.
sort of looking to act on it, but it's a matter of how quickly they actually do.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, you don't know that it's going to make it out of subcommittee in
Right.
any case. So that-
I would echo a lot of what Ann and Brian said. I was very impressed with the UTV owners that we visited with, and they were very knowledgeable and conscientious, and I think if we could write an ordinance that said everybody that operates a UTV within the city limits of Waverly is going to be like them, that would be great. My apprehension is, can we write an ordinance that's that restrictive, and then can we enforce it? I agree with Ann. I think if we're going to do an ordinance, I would like it to say it has to have this and this and this and this features on it, and it might not be factory standard features, but if you're going to operate here, those are the safety things that we're going to require. And I would like to see it very clearly spelled out exactly where they can operate and where they can't. One of the questions that has come to my mind, as some of the people that have contacted us have talked about, this is a social thing that's become very popular, that groups of people like to use their ATVs and go to small towns and recreate there. Well, if you can't drive it on Bremer Avenue or on 4th Street, what bars and restaurants can you go to is one question that comes to my mind, and do so legally. And I'm bothered by the fact that the manufacturers don't put a stamp of approval on it, too. I question the liability part. So I am in the same boat as Ann. I'm undecided on this because I think that the people who are the model users make a really strong argument for it, but I'm not there yet in terms of being able to see the logistics.
That's a good point that I hadn't thought about. If someone's on the west side of town, how would they get to the east side of town, and vice versa, without either going on Bremer Avenue to cross the Cedar River Bridge there, or Adams Parkway to cross the bridge there, which is I'm not sure it's still a county blacktop when it's at Adams Parkway, but they would have to actually go on that particular street to be able to get across the river.
So how
that
do the
would
golf carts? The golf carts are able to cross that, right?
No, they take the rail trail bridge, and that was something you decided when the construction was going on.
And that was
Allowed it,
temporary.
And it was temporary, I thought.
Yeah. See, and that's not really a solution with UTVs to take the rail trail bridge, because I don't want to mix these vehicles with pedestrians.
Right.
But that would be, if we're taking a look at an ordinance, that might be something we'd either have to make an exception, and I don't know if that would be available with the state law, that they would be able to cross, use the bridge to cross the river, even though it's a state highway, or if they would have to be basically isolated on one side of the town or the other.
Well, state law says they cross at a 90-degree angle perpendicular to the highway. You cannot travel on that highway, so they cannot cross a bridge, according to state law.
Probably leave only the Adams Parkway Bridge. Correct. Might be able to use that.
Then down Cedar Lane, which is one of our more congested streets to start with. I don't want to comment a lot about it because it's not my duty to do so, but I hear a lot of conversation as if we have model citizens in the UTVs and these golf cart people the most evil out there driving, and I think it's ridiculous because the same person and behavior you're going to see in golf carts, you will see in UTVs, I'll guarantee it. Mm-hmm. You'll get the conversation from the model citizens, but you are opening this up to everybody, not just the model citizens. The people that pull their kids behind them on sleds and about hit them in the cars, saw that this weekend. That's the other group you're going to open this up to. So just be careful that we don't go too far, too fast, because golf carts are not, yes, people abuse them. I think we ought to restrict it to going to and from the course, nothing else. I really do. That's my opinion. I've ridden with people in a golf cart. I'd rather ride alone. It's horrible, some people that drive them. And they're not even near the speed and power of what you're talking about. So as we go through this, we'll certainly do whatever you'd like to do, but I just wanted to point it out that you're not looking at model citizens and vagrants in golf carts. It's the same people. It's just a matter of what they're driving and what they're choosing to drive or not choosing to drive. So let's be careful we don't pinpoint someone versus
what
the
I was
other.
saying. There's all sorts of vehicles. So
It is, from bicycles to
same type of
scooters.
people I like to comment that kids walk through the hallways at school just like they drive. They can't, nobody looks and they stop on their own, it's signaling, and they just turn. And
We have bad behavior and bad driving in every vehicle in the city, not just these or that, or cars or trucks or anything else. It's everywhere. It's a matter of which one is safe or which one isn't. I'm not going to get in an argument. We'll draft what you'd like us to draft, depending on how you go. But let's just not go too far with how perfect these drivers are, because be serious.
Well, my point, though, is, James, is that even you're looking at automobiles. Okay, there are people that drive automobiles and don't obey the law. All you have to do is sit at a stop sign for a couple of minutes and count how many people actually stop at the stop sign. My neighbor and I did that when Bremer Avenue was closed because of the road construction. And we looked at how many people actually stopped at the stop sign on the corner by my house. And in about a 15-minute time, there was probably about 10%.
Yeah.
That stopped. I mean, it's 90%. It's probably 10% that stopped and about 20% that kind of a rolling stop. We'd probably give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But 70% just blew right on through. And if we're going to be, if we are going to say only people who are perfect and obey the law and never do anything wrong are going to be able to drive on city streets, we're going to have to prohibit just about everybody from driving on city streets.
I don't disagree at all. That's actually my point. I don't want to commit to say, well, these people are going to do this so much better, and it's going to be, that's garbage. They're all going to drive the same, whether they're in a bike or a car or a truck. You're going to have that same issue no matter what you're in. I just didn't want to go too far with gobbing on the frosting, this is going to be so great.
Sure.
You're going to have issues no matter what you do.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. I'm not sure that that's the discussion for tonight. If we can, if we want to. I understand where you're coming from. I think I'm looking at it from a little bit different perspective. And what I'm saying is if somebody, if we're allowing people to be bad drivers and drive on city streets, how can we say these people can drive on the city streets, even though they're bad drivers, but these people can't? So I have a real hard time parsing the difference between people driving motorcycles and cars and pickups and people driving UTVs on city streets. And I just don't see that there's enough of a difference for me to say one group can drive on them and another group can't. I do have issues, and I don't really think that it's appropriate to compare this with golf carts. I agree, golf carts maybe we need to take a look at because they're not designed the same way. They don't have the same safety features, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, I want to just bring this to a close to say that my intention here was that we bring this in front of the council to say, is this something we want to take a closer look at, or are we going to pull the plug and tell people, no, we really don't want to go forward with this? So
I agree.
Well,
just to add on, I'm looking at this manual for a golf cart, and it says these vehicles do not conform to U.S. federal motor vehicle safety standards for automobiles, blah, 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 for low-speed vehicles are not equipped for operation on public streets, roads, or highways. So that's for golf carts saying they don't recommend that either. So
same with snowmobiles.
Yeah, I think the other issue is our expert on public safety, who's our chief of police, is definitely not in favor of this. Right. And so I think that's another issue for me, is that I think, logic will only take you so far with this sort of argument. And it boils down to whether people are going to respect, safety and the rules of the road. And like we've said, they don't. We know that.
Yeah,
and so
I wonder, I know, Chief, you kind of want to say something, and you did give us a note. I just, for brevity and time here, do we want to discuss more on this before offering a direction? I don't know, Chief, if you've got something short that would add into this beyond what you already gave us, or?
Yeah, so I gave you a two-page thing that's based on all safety recommendations, based on state law. And so the only thing I don't understand is the comparison between a golf cart. Talking about the unsafety aspects of another vehicle doesn't make this particular ORV safe. I do agree that we need to address the golf cart issue. But I don't know what the answer is, but we already do something that's unsafe, so let's just That makes it safer. So if we were to move forward, if the vote tonight is to move forward, I think staff would need some type of guidance. We have an ordinance in place. We have an inspection policy in place. We have safety requirements. The only thing that is limited is the use, what it can be used for. And so if you open that up to all uses and to all locations outside of what we can't change, which is state law. And state law is, unlike golf carts, is silent. State law is not silent on ORVs. Safety manufacturers are not silent. Every single training education you see in reference to ORVs states not to be operated on paved roadways. So we would be creating an ordinance that is contrary to every single safety training guidelines that's out there. So, but if we do move forward, if that's what council wants to do, then I think we need to get guidance from council of do you want to open it up to all locations. I don't recommend having a route. If people aren't going to trailer their ORVs to the city limits, they're not going to trailer it to a specific route in town. So, and I don't know that we want to try to police that either. And you're right, everybody that's in the west side, north side, west of the river, they'll be going by Cedar Lane by Pete's house to get downtown. So the only way you can access the city of Waverly is 240th, 220th, and 11th. So there's three ways into town, but the only way you get to this side of town is 220th or on Bremer Road or by Cedar Lane. So it limits it. It does funnel it.
What about the liability? Let's say we write an ordinance and we pass it, so they can be used in town, and God forbid, a horrible accident happens. If the manufacturers have said these are not to be used on roads, and I don't know what other powers that be, whether that's the state or, but what is our liability then? Are we opening ourselves up completely just simply by allowing something that the manufacturers say shouldn't be used?
I would say our liability is the same with having golf carts being able to drive on pavement.
Well, I think we're all in agreement that the golf carts need to be looked at.
Yeah.
And I think to the extent that there is currently a double standard, golf carts are allowed, ORVs are not, that needs to be rectified. But let's just look at the ORV issue and say, okay, we're going to fix the golf cart thing, but that's like, my 10-year-old jumped on his 3-year-old's brother's head and didn't kill him, and so the older kid says, well, you allowed that to happen, so I'm going to do this. That doesn't make sense. Sorry, I kind of went down a rabbit hole there. What's our liability?
So generally, you won't have to worry about that kind of liability if you allow vehicles that the state hasn't said that you shouldn't allow, that you have the permission to do that. It isn't that allowance that causes the damages or the injuries, it's the negligence of the operator. So you're really not causing anything as a city that would cause you to be liable, I don't think, or the city to be liable.
Okay, so even if the manufacturer says these shouldn't be used on roads, but we say they can be, but we're not going to be liable if something bad happens, that's the operator.
The operator is actually ignoring their own guidance from their own vehicle. So
okay.
It's like breaking the law, speeding, running stop signs. It's not something we're liable for because they made a bad choice and decided to break a law and do that. It's kind of a similar situation. We're not abating it. We're not helping it. We're just passing something that if you follow it, you're fine. If you don't, there are consequences. So.
Okay,
and I gotta imagine that in the case of both the manufacturer's suggestions on these and golf carts, it's a financial reason why they're doing it. It's nothing, I mean, you can't tell me it's safer to go out mudding and going in the hills and the ditches. That's, is it safe? Yeah, if you do it in a certain way, but it's driving 20 to Casey's is a different deal.
Well, I keep coming back to personal responsibility. I mean, will someone get hurt? Probably. And I think that goes without saying that at some point, sooner or later, someone driving or riding in a UTV will be in an accident and will get hurt. More than likely, the person in the UTV is going to be hurt much more than the car that hits them or the car that they hit. My point is that that's really their personal choice to drive in the UTV, not our choice to say, well, we think you might get hurt, so we don't want you to do it. These are all adults. These are all licensed drivers. And to me, if they want to make the decision to drive in a UTV, and these are not inherently dangerous vehicles like an ATV would be, have a real issue with that. But if these are not inherently dangerous vehicles, they understand the risks involved and want to drive under the rules that we establish. I don't have a problem with them doing that because I don't want to substitute my judgment for their judgment and whether they feel that's an acceptable risk or not.
Okay. I think we've gone around on this enough.
Yeah.
To go. The only question I would have, and this comes from what I've heard, but also from my own kind of thought on this, Rod, would be to offer an amendment to your resolution to have the staff also look at amending the golf cart portion of the ordinance.
I have no problem with that.
Same.
Heather? Okay.
Amendment to what, though? That's the question. What do you want us to amend it to?
Well, to look at allowing UTVs, what it would take, but also looking at amending the golf cart ordinance portion of the city code as well.
But to do what? The golf carts to do what, or to not?
I think to restrict is what would be my perspective of that.
Maybe it would be better, I think, Tim, if we did these as two separate resolutions.
Okay.
If someone wants to introduce a resolution at our next meeting that we prohibit golf carts or have the city come with a recommendation as far as golf carts or something like that, let's make that a separate deal.
Okay, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And I'll withdraw it. We don't need to vote on that motion at all. We'll go ahead and do, if no other discussion, roll call vote on this.
Kangas?
Yes.
Meyers?
Yes.
Rathe?
Yes.
Schneider?
Yes.
Beaufore?
Yes.
Birgen?
No.
Drenkow?
Yes.
By a vote of 6 yes and 1 no, the resolution 2207 moves forward. And we'll go ahead and go on to Resolution 2208, a resolution approving lease agreements between the City of Waverly and Lonnie Evan, James Jansen, and William Lowe for property adjacent to the airport.
I will move approval of Resolution 22-08, approving lease agreement between the City of Waverly and Lonnie Evan, James Jansen, and William Lowe for the safety zone acquisition parcels of land that are adjacent to their properties for the amount of $225 per share.
Second.
Any discussion? It was per acre instead of acre.
Oh, sure, per acre.
Okay, roll call vote?
Meyers?
Yes.
Rathe?
Yes.
Schneider?
Yes.
Beaufore?
Yes.
Bergen?
Yes.
Drenkow?
Yes.
Kangas?
Yes. By a vote of 7 yes, 0 no's, Resolution 2208 is adopted. We move to Section K of the agenda, which is reports from boards and commissions. We have the Human Equity and Diversity minutes from 12/14/21, the monthly financials for October, November, and December. We have the 11/18/21 Leisure Services Commission meeting minutes, and senior calendar for January 2022. Take those into the record. Section L, staff updates. James?
I don't think we have any tonight, sir.
Okay. Start with Section M, city council comments. Start over to the right here, my right here, Mr. Birgen.
My usual, I would invite anyone who wants to discuss city businesses to join me for a beer at the Wooden Foot tonight.
No comments.
I just wanted to remind everybody that the WSR Science Club, it has a tree sale going on. There's information on the Leisure Services website, on the WSR Science Club website, Facebook pages, and you can get a discount on trees, and the sale is open till March 1st, and then the pickup, I believe, is in early May. So take a peek at that. It's partially a project of Trees Forever and the Science Club. So the proceeds go toward scholarships and other activities for the club.
Thank you. Meyers.
Kind of along the same lines, the Golf Commission, when they did their report in November, I think, talked about the tree campaign to try to replace some of the dozens of trees that have been lost out there to disease, and they are currently at $25,000, I think. Is that right, Garrett?
That's correct.
Of their $30,000 goal, so that's really awesome, and they're still welcoming any contributions to that.
Just a quick thing here, I was at the last utility meeting and post-audit, there was a review of personnel policies and procedure, their travel policy. It might be good for city staff to look at what the utility did there and perhaps follow suit. They did note that it had been several years since we had changed ours. I don't think ours is off, but just one of those things that might need to be tightened up. So if you wouldn't mind taking a look at that, I'd appreciate that.
I finished my third cup of coffee, so I think it's time to go home. I'm going to pass on comments.
Okay. Just a couple comments. One, I want to thank our streets and public works people for the work they do over the weekend when the snowstorm that came through. We are one of the better cities around. I've gone down to my parents in Cedar Falls and note that I have a harder time driving on some of the streets in Cedar Falls than I do in the streets in Waverly in terms of how clear they are. So I do appreciate the work that they do and the hours that they put in to get that done. As far as that, the other one is we have a budget session on Saturday. It is riveting if the public wishes to come and sit in and listen in. It actually is very informative. If you really want to dive into how the city gets to some of these things, this is the one to come to and really dive into, because this is the detailed one. We spend pretty much the entire day Saturday, so you're welcome to come and join us. We start at 8?
8:30.
8:30? Okay. Don't want to break in down the doors lining up outside in the cold. Okay.
Fight the crowd.
Other than that, I have no more comments. Take a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.